Hello everyone and welcome to the next lecture which we make as a part of Silk Road Chapters project. These lectures are devoted to the history of Central Asia, and today we're going to talk about the man who played a great role in the history of Central Asia. Maybe even he was the most famous person in the local history, and it's of course Amir Timur, or maybe you know him more as Tamerlane. So the times of the Tamerlane and Timurids, his dynasty, which is the second half of 14th and also the whole 15th century, it really shaped the history of Central Asia from politics to architecture, from culture to trading. So without understanding the life of Tamerlane and without following his life path, we won't be able to understand the local history. Before talking about Tamerlane himself, I would like to explain a little bit about the life in Central Asia at the times when Timur was born in the 14th century. So starting from the 13th century, when this territory was conquered by Genghis Khan and his army, the central part of Central Asia, it was the part of ulus of Chagatai. Genghis Khan altogether, he had 4 sons, and the second son, Chagatai, he got this territory after Genghis Khan died, and that's why this territory was called Ulus of Chagatai. Ulus, that means state. But by the middle of the 14th century, when Timur was a teenager, the situation here in Central Asia wasn't stable at all. Here we had a lot of strifes, a lot of civil wars, because the territory was already divided into many small states where ruled either the descendants of Genghis Khan or some local aristocracy, some local dynasties. So let's turn our attention to Tamerlane. Tamerlane is a version of his name which is famous in the Western countries like Europe or in the United States, but here we call him Amir Timur. Timur, it's his name, which means iron, and Amir, it's his title, which means general or commander. You may know this word in a little bit different version. Emir, like emirate. Here in our land, we just usually refer to him as Timur. So if you hear Timur, you know who we're talking about. Timur was born in 3036 in a place which is called nowadays Shakhrisabz, and it's around 70 kilometers to the south from Samarkand. But in the times of Timur, this place was famous as Kesh, not Cash like in English, but Kesh. Very funny fact that even though Timur is considered to be the main hero of Uzbek history, there was nothing Uzbek in him. He belonged to the tribe, to the Mongol tribe, which is called Barlas, but he was not descendant of Genghis Khan. How it's possible? So basically, when Genghis Khan arrived to this territory in 13th century, a lot of tribes came with him, and some of these tribes decided not to come back to Mongolia, and they stayed here, they lived here, and they assimilated with the local population. So the father of Timur, he was from this tribe, Barlas, so he was Mongol, and the mother of Timur, she was Persian. We have quite a lot of Persians here in Central Asia, but we call them Tajiks. So Tajiks, they are local Persians, and so if we mix Timur like this, we get half Mongol, half Persian, half Tajik. So as I said, nothing of Uzbek blood in him. When Timur was around 14 years old, his father decided to send him to Samarkand to start the military career. Yes, for us, 14 years old, it's like almost like a baby, not even a teenager, but it's for modern times. In the 14th century, being 14 years old meant that you already almost grown up, so it was a good time to start your career. And the military career was a preferred career for any man at that time, especially if we talk about aristocracy or elite. Timur comes to Samarkand, which at that time was the capital of quite a small state where ruled Emir Kazagan. So you hear that he's Emir, so he's not descendant of Genghis Khan. And Timur, he very quickly becomes a friend of the grandson of that Emir who ruled in Samarkand. And of course, it really helped him to move forward in his career. But as you know, the situation in Central Asia at that time, it was very unstable, a lot of civil wars, a lot of strifes. And basically at that time, if you were young, strong, ambitious, it was very easy for you to move forward, to start some career. But career of Timur, it's actually a very funny thing because he started as the leader of the mob of gangsters. Well, yeah, of course, I'm simplifying a little bit, but yes, in his young days, when he was like 18, 19, 20, Timur was the head of the group of the young people who were earning money by less than legal means. So here we come to the particularly important part of the life of Timur. So let's talk why in the Western world he's called Tamerlane, not Timur. So Tamerlane, this name, nickname, it consists of two parts. So the first part, Tamir, or Timir, or Demir, depends on the language, that means iron. And the second part of his name, Tamerlane, so lane, it comes from the Persian word lang, which means lame, because Timur was literally limping on his right leg. It was a problem for the whole of his life. And actually, how it happened? It happened when he was very young, again, when he was leading the life of the gangster. We don't know a lot of details because Timur, he didn't like to share this information, even in his official biography. In the later years, he didn't like to talk about that. But we know that he was wounded when he and his colleagues, let's say, they were stealing the livestock, and the owner of that livestock, he wounded Timur with an arrow on his right leg and his right arm, and that's how Timur was limping for the whole his life. Plus, he could barely use his right arm, yeah, and he was missing two fingers also here. So basically, from the very young age, Timur was not physically able to fight, and he was not able to hold the bow or the sword. And starting from that time, he was just the head of all the campaigns, of all the operations. And actually, for me, it was always really astonishing that at that time, when being physically strong was so important for any man, doesn't matter whether you were rich, noble, or just a simple peasant, but Timur, he probably had a very strong charisma, very strong character, that even being physically disabled, he still managed to control people, and people were obeying him, following his orders, and even more, he managed to create a huge empire, which is still considered one of the biggest empires in the world history. Another important part of the reign of Timur is that, of course, you notice that I don't call him Han, I call him Emir or Amir, because as you already know, if you watched our previous lectures, that at that time only the descendants of Genghis Khan could be called Hans, and Timur, he wasn't descendant of Genghis Khan. Yes, he was half Mongol, but not descendant of Genghis Khan. And so when in 1370 Timur finally becomes the ruler of the central part of Central Asia, he couldn't take the title of Han. So officially he was always having someone from the lineage of Genghis Khan as the official ruler, who was always by his side. And officially Timur had the title of general or commander, so he was the head of the army. But of course, everyone understood who was the main person here and who really ruled all the situation. So Timur started to rule in 1370, but please don't think that all of a sudden he becomes a ruler of the huge empire, of the big state. No. From the very beginning, he had a small piece of land with Samarkand as the main city. And so the first around 20 years of his reign, he spent in a different kind of military campaigns, just trying to unite the territory of Central Asia, of modern Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and etc. And only after he united the Central Asia, he started to make military campaigns far away from home, and I bet you already looked at the map and you know that the state, the empire of Timur, it lasted from India, so he came up to Delhi and then up to Turkey. But here you need to be very careful, because at some maps they show that, oh, Timur, he came up to Istanbul, he conquered Istanbul. No, it's not true. It's not like this. The furthest point that Timur himself came, it was Ankara, the capital of Turkey, but his troops, his soldiers, they came up to Bursa, which is around 1.5-hour drive from Istanbul. So you see that Empire of Timur, it included a lot of modern states, not just Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan or Kyrgyzstan, but also Afghanistan, Pakistan, part of India, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Armenia, Georgia, and etc. And finally, in the beginning of 15th century, Timur included Turkey in his plans. Modern Turkey, of course, it wasn't Turkey at that time. In the beginning of 15th century, the ruler of Ottoman Empire was Bayezid II. His nickname was Thunderbolt. And the great battle between Bayezid and Timur, it happened in 1402, not far away from Ankara. And it was really huge battle where Timur won. So he included Turkey, he made it a part of his empire. But at the same time, we have a lot of sources which say that Timur treated Bayezid as equal, because he was also the ruler of the big state. But we know for sure that Bayezid, he died in captivity several months after the battle happened, not far away from Ankara. But even though Timur was so far from his motherland, the main idea of these faraway campaigns was not to make these territories a part of his state, but to put them into submission, rob them, of course, because any military campaign, it's a good money, and plus to make sure that these conquered territories, they pay tributes on a permanent basis. That's how Timur, he was okay with putting someone local to rule these conquered faraway territories, and even more, very often he was okay that the local dynasty continues to rule even after his invasion. Just the main thing is to be obedient and to pay taxes to him. The next plan of Timur, it was to conquer China. Why China? Because China was always a very good price to win, a very good place to rob, to get some money. That's how Timur ordered to his generals, to his soldiers, to get ready for the next military campaign. And it was the winter of 1404-1405. As we know from the sources, it was a very, very cold winter, and usually at that times the military campaigns were stopped for the winter times because it was too cold. It was necessary to buy some heavy clothes for the soldiers and etc. But Timur, he didn't want to listen. He said, no, you start the preparations. At that time, Timur was almost 70 years old, and that is quite impressive, you know, if you think that around 55 years of his life he spent in different kind of military campaigns. Plus, as you know, he was disabled, yes, so it was not easy for him. Probably he just didn't want to wait, because he could feel that, oh my God, I'm getting old, maybe soon I'm going to die. And so the campaign started, but between Central Asia and China, there are mountains, there are Tian Shan mountains. So you cannot go directly from Samarkand to Shenzhen, for example. You need to go around. And so army moved to the north from Samarkand, they crossed Sirdarya river, and finally they came to the place which is called Otrar. It's nowadays it's a city in Kazakhstan. So there Timur caught cold and died. So there was nothing mysterious in his death, because again in some Wikipedias you can read that, oh my God, he was drinking too much wine, that's why he died, or he died because he was hugging some beautiful concubine, which is not true. He was just old, physically not very strong, and it was a very, very cold winter. And after he died, some generals, they wanted to continue the military campaign again to get some money from robbing the population. But when the soldiers of Timur, they heard that, oh, our big master died, they didn't want to continue, and that's how the whole army came back to Samarkand with the body of Timur. One of the interesting facts of the state of Timur, after he conquered Turkey, a lot of European countries started to send the envoys and ambassadors to his court, to Samarkand. Why? Because basically they were very scared that Timur can continue his military campaigns and finally come up to Europe and conquer that territory. And they wanted to make friendship with Timur. That's how the envoys started to come to Central Asia. And the most famous one is Ruy González de Clavijo. He was from Castilla and he spent around 2 years in Samarkand, and he left a very beautiful book of memoirs about this trip. And I really recommend you to find that book and read it. There is English version, obviously. This book will really help you to understand the life of the court of Timur, the life of his wives, the life of his army, and etc. So you will get a very good understanding about the life of Timur. So it's 1405, Timur is dead, and here occurs the problem, because before Timur died, he didn't leave any official heir. Yes, he had an heir who was his grandson named Muhammad Sultan, but unfortunately that grandson, he was killed in the Battle of Ankara in 1402, which was of course a big tragedy for Timur, and he even ordered to construct an outstanding mausoleum for his grandson, and we now know this mausoleum as Guremir, where Timur is also buried himself. But Timur altogether had 4 sons. 2 sons, they died young before Timur himself died, and his other 2 sons, he didn't want to leave the state to them, because his third son, Miranshah, well, of course we can only understand that from some documents and sources. He most probably had schizophrenia, so of course he wasn't a good choice to rule the country. The fourth son, Shahrukh, well, Timur didn't make him an heir, and that's how, after the death of Timur, starts a kind of civil war between all his relatives, because he had sons, daughters, grandsons, grandchildren, and of course each of them wanted to continue to rule in the country. So this civil war, it lasted for around 4 years, when finally in 1405 Shahrukh, this fourth son of Timur, he wins all these battles and he becomes the ruler of the empire of Timur. But he moved the capital from Samarkand to Herat. Now it's a city in modern Afghanistan. He ruled from there, and Samarkand, it only became the second main city in the state of Timur, and Timurids and Ulugbek, the famous grandson of Timur, the famous astronomer and mathematician, he becomes the ruler in Samarkand. Ulugbek, he was more famous not as a ruler, not as a military person, but as a mathematician and astronomer. For example, he constructed a big observatory in the suburbs of Samarkand, where he, together with his colleagues, created a book called Zicce Gurgani, where they found then calculated the coordinates of more than 1,000 stars. But the life of Ulugbek is a topic for another lecture. After the death of Timur, his state unfortunately lost its stability and slowly started to lose all its territories, like Syria, like Armenia, like Georgia, like territories of Iraq, even a little bit of Iran. Why this happened? Well, basically because Timur himself, as a leader, he was what we now call like the full package. He was a good manager, he was a good general, good commander, and etc. But his descendants, no, they were not as good as him, they were not as talented as he was. And that's how the state of Timur in the second half of 15th century, it started to fall into pieces, where the different descendants of Timur started to rule. And the situation became pretty much the same as it was 100 years before that, in the middle of 14th century, when the descendants of Genghis Khan were fighting against one another. Same situation, so descendants of Timur, they were busy with the same things, and of course each of them were thinking about themselves as Timur 2.0. Yes, they're samely smart, samely talented, but unfortunately it was not true. So that's how by the beginning of the 16th century, the territory of the state of Timur, it was just torn into pieces by his descendants. And that's how it was very easy for Safavids, the dynasty that ruled in modern Iran, and the tribes of Shaybanids to conquer this territory, which they successfully did. And the next dynasty, which started to rule here in 16th century, it was the dynasty of Shaybanids, and they moved the capital from Samarkand to Bukhara. But you know that in reality, the descendants of Timur, they ruled up to 19th century. How is it possible? So in the end of 15th century, in the city called Andijan, it's in Fergana Valley, was born the man whose name was Zahreddin Muhammad Babur, and he was great grandson of Timur. So of course he also was thinking about himself, yes, I'm the next Timur, and he was trying to reunite the territories of the state of Timurids. He even managed to conquer Samarkand 3 times, but finally he had to escape. He firstly moved to Afghanistan, where he conquered Kabul, and from there he moved to the south to India, where in 1525 he became the founder of the empire of great Mongols, who, as you know, ruled in India till the 19th century, when, as you know, English people, they took over the state of great Mongols, and that's how India became the part of the English empire. So that's how the descendants of Timur, they ruled till 19th century for several hundreds of years. And imagine that Taj Mahal, one of the most famous buildings in the world, it was constructed by Shah Jahan, who was a lot of great grandson of Timur. So he belonged to the same dynasty. Now I would like to discuss an issue which always referred to the reign of Timur, and that's, oh, Timur, he was so cruel, he ordered to kill tens and hundreds of thousands of people in the places that he was conquering. Well, yes, partly it's true. I don't say that he was not ordering to kill people, and yes, in Iran, for example, a lot of cities were just destroyed together with the people who lived there. But I always say that don't forget that it was 600 years ago. So the times were totally different. So people had a different understanding of what cruel is. Think about Genghis Khan, think about the Charles the Great, think about the time of Crusades. So historically, commanders very often ordered to kill people, but not for the act of killing himself, but to put the fear on their opponents and to make them surrender more willingly. So imagine if from one city comes a news that, oh my God, they killed all the people there, so let's surrender, let's not fight against themselves. So that was really the tactics which Timur used during his wars. Plus, if we talk about some archaeological proofs, we don't really have any mass graves, you know, of the people who were killed by Timur. And of course, I don't mean that Genghis Khan or Timur, they were innocent people, but don't forget that 600 years ago, the understanding of cruelty was really different. Another side of the reign of Timur is that he was not only very talented general, talented commander, but he also was a very good statesman. He was really taking care of his empire. Yes, we know a lot of such stories that from all the countries that he was conquering, he was bringing the best artisans, poets, writers, musicians to Samarkand, to his capital. But not only that, he also was really taking care about the trading routes, because trading was the main income for all the countries at that time. That's how the caravans, they could really use the safe roads, and that safety was provided by Timur and also during his dynasty. So the times of Timur and his descendants is considered to be the last explosion of the Great Silk Road, that it functions in 14th and 15th century, because starting from 16th century, the traders, they started to prefer the sea routes because it was cheaper and it was quicker. Also, don't forget about all the constructions that Timur performed not only in Samarkand, but also think about Bukhara, Shakhrisabz, Herat. And still these monuments, they're really well known in the whole world, and these monuments are one of the main reasons why the foreigners come here. As we come to a close of this lecture, I couldn't help mentioning the great role that Timur played and still plays in the local life, in the life of Uzbekistan and Central Asia. So, of course, the scientists still debate him. The weight, the damage he made to the places like, for example, Delhi or Aleppo, or on the other hand, we have the cultural boom in Samarkand and Bukhara. And after this region became independent, especially for Uzbekistan, Timur became a very easy mascot. So we can see his images in many places, but please don't think that here people think about him like the best person in the world, or that here there is some cult of Timur. No, it's nothing like this, but yes, Timur is considered to be the main hero of local history. For example, we have a lot of places which are still named after Timur, like streets. Yes, we have one of the subway stations named after him, some squares and other places. Even one of the main medals of the state of Uzbekistan, it is named after Timur. I hope I managed to create some image of Timur in your heads. We talked about his state, we talked about his family a little bit, we talked about his good and bad sides, so it's only up to you which side to choose. If you enjoyed this lecture, please like, share, comment and tell your friends about it, and see you next time.